Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel in comments below. We love to know what you want to hear next.
Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 51. Cult Mistress. Why am I here? Granny C walked out of the straw hut, choking with emotions. I've raised you up with blood and sweat, yet you ran away with a vixen without a word, leaving Granny alone behind. You still dare to ask me why am I here? Now that you have grown up, you rather have a vixen than Granny. Little vixen, how do you want to die? Qin Mu immediately smiled. Granny, you're mistaken. I had met Hu Linger unintentionally and heard her bring up Surging River Dragon Palace. Therefore, we had gone over to take a look. Because I was studying a real dragon inside the Dragon Palace, I had forgotten about my surroundings and ended up staying another 2 days inside. It's not 2 days but 4. You said you're studying a real dragon? Granny C asked suspiciously. The little vixen didn't nourish herself by absorbing your vital qi. Hu Linger looked away embarrassedly and hid behind Qin Mu as she was also slightly afraid. Qin Mu roused his vital and smiled. Please take a look, Granny. A deep and low dragon roar reverberated out as Qin Mu's vital qi surged out, turning into a huge dragon coiling around his body. The two dragons' claws fused together with his arms, and as Qin Mu moved forward while giving off a punch, a loud rumble exploded out as the thunderclap burst forth. Thunderclaps resonated out over and over again in the valley as Qin Mu gave off punch after punch. Green Dragon Vital Qi. Granny C was incessantly astonished. She knew old Ma didn't impart realized Mahayana scripture to Qin Mu. Without a technique that's suitable for Thunderclap 8 strikes, no matter how dense Qin Mu's vital qi becomes, he would never have much attainments in Thunderclap 8 strikes. However now, Qin Mu actually managed to punch out the sound of thunder, with his fists like rolling thunder. The only thing missing now was lightning. Without a corresponding cultivation technique in the spirit embryo realm, it was almost an impossible task to actually achieve this step. And that wasn't the most crucial point. It was the Green Dragon Vital Qi. The green dragon that had coiled around Qin Mu's body was the Green Dragon Vital Qi, which solely belonged to the Green Dragon spirit body of the 4 great spirit bodies. This was the third attribute that belonged to Qin Mu's overlord body. By observing water and fire, Qin Mu's overlord body Vital Qi had gained the water and fire attributes which corresponded to the Black Tortoise Vital Qi and the Vermilion Bird Vital Qi, and now he also had the lightning attribute of the Green Dragon Vital Qi. Could it be that Moor had plucked the little vixen and nourished himself instead, boosting his cultivation? That couldn't be it. I had never taught him the devil techniques of plucking and nourishing. What's exactly is going on when he said that he had seen a real dragon? Granny C was puzzled. Qin Mu returned to his original stance, and the green dragon, which was formed by his vital qi, returned back into his body. From the dragon's head to the dragon's tail, it was vivid and realistic, just like a real divine dragon. Qin Mu was also startled and delighted. He didn't think that he could punch out the sound of thunder. When the little monk, Ming Xian, had executed Thunderclap 8 strikes and punched out the sound of thunder, he was beyond envious. Qin Mu could also punch out the sound of thunder by using the Devil God Mighty Force Mudra, but he would use up much more energy. The consumption of Thunderclap 8 strikes was much lesser, and while cultivating Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, which was better in battle, there was practically no consumption of his vital qi while in battle. Punching out the sound of thunder meant that his power had progressed rapidly once more. As he described his encounters in the Dragon Palace, Granny C was entranced by his story. When she heard that Qin Mu had met skeletons that wore official robes and dry corpses, her gaze flickered and said, "There's something weird going on with 2 different kinds of deaths. You must be careful when entering." When Qin Mu talked about the young dragon and Gu Linwan who had been frozen in the mysterious ice by the dragon bead, Granny C clapped her hands together and smiled. "There's something strange with Gu Linwan, this old fellow. The skeletons wearing the official robes must have died under his hands and got eaten by him. In the officialdom, everyone is vicious and greedy. How did you manage to trick him?" Hu Linger was impressed. This old lady didn't even see with her own eyes and had managed to come to the same conclusion as Qin Mu just by hearing his story. Could she be a demon fox that had turned intelligent as well? Qin Mu described how he had learned the secrets of Elixir Heart and took out the Junior Protector Sword. Granny C took the sword over to examine it and exclaimed in admiration, "The Junior Protector Sword is indeed one of the rare treasures in this world." The Eternal Peace Empire had forged 16 first-rank swords, and among them were Junior Protector Sword, Grand Protector Sword, Grand Tutor Sword, Junior Tutor Sword, Grand Preceptor Sword, Junior Preceptor Sword, 3 Minister Swords, White Horse Sword, Crown Prince Sword, Commandery Prince Sword, Duke Sword, Grand Marshal Sword, Sikong Sword, and Heavenly Strategy Sword, which were conferred to Junior Protector, Grand Protector, Grand Tutor, Junior Tutor, Grand Preceptor, Junior Preceptor. To the Crown Prince, the 3 Ministers, White Horse Grand General, Crown Prince, Commandery Prince, Duke, Grand Marshal, Sikong, and Heaven Strategies Grand General. Even though the Junior Protector Sword isn't as good as an upper first-ranking sword, it's more than enough to be used as a sex legacy treasure for other sections. It's so valuable? Qin Mu jumped in shock and asked, "How valuable is this sword compared to Kakara Monkstaff?" Granny C replied, "They're about the same. Kakara Monkstaff have the blessing of Rulai, and Junior Protector Sword is a first-ranking official sword which carries the fortune of Eternal Peace Empire, having an extremely strong power." Qin Mu asked. He said that the sword arts of Eternal Peace Empire was the #1 sword arts in the world, but I didn't learn it. I only learned the sword control techniques of Secrets of Elixir Heart. Was I right to do so? It was the right thing to not learn. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor may be one of the best, but Gu Linwan was one of our kindred devils, and his sword arts might not reach the standard of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. You have to see whom you are learning sword arts from. No matter how great the sword arts is, if the teacher is bad, it would still be full of mistakes. Look at the little monk, Ming Xian. He had also cultivated Thunderclap 8 strikes, but because his master had taught him badly, he had a flaw in his throat. With meaningful and heartfelt words, Granny C said, "Therefore you must choose the best master when learning sword arts. Half-baked masters are a definite no." Qin Mu was bewildered. Gu Linwan was, after all, a lower first-ranking official, the Junior Protector of the Crown Prince. Was he a half-baked as well? "I'm not going to kill you anymore, little fox." Granny C smiled. "Let's go home, Moor. The villagers must be worried sick and thought you must have been eaten by a strange beast out on your first hunt. Only Granny is smart and knows you had been smitten away by a little fox. Therefore, I've been waiting here for you." "That's right, little fox. Granny had flipped through those ancient books of yours and written down a few notes for you. You can go flip through it yourself and avoid cultivating wrongly." Hu Linger was embarrassed and hung her head down dispiritedly. "I can't read." Granny C was astonished and laughed. "What an honest demon fox. Seeing that you didn't lay your hands on Moor and helped him chance upon an opportunity. Fine, Granny shan't lie to you. If you had followed the notes I had written and cultivate, you will definitely suffer from chi deviation and die miserably. That's the result of fooling around with my child." Hu Linger shuddered in fear and thought to herself, young Master Mu was right. The elderly in his village are all experts in swindling. They're all old foxes that have turned intelligent. Not long later, they had reached disabled elderly village. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He had no idea when a village had appeared next to disabled elderly village. The village was obviously newly built and much larger than disabled elderly village. It also had an extraordinary grandeur, giving off a luxurious feel. Disabled elderly village's houses were all made from ordinary mud walls and had thatched roof which would leak when it was raining. Qin Mu would frequently bring over a washbowl to collect rainwater in the house. Compared to the village that had suddenly appeared beside, disabled elderly village had seemed to be much wretched. Granny C's expression turned dark as she brought Qin Mu towards disabled elderly village without a word. This new village was right at the side of the village path, and at this moment, all sorts of strange people started to walk out and standing at the side of the path. There were the old, the young, males and females. Every time Granny C passed by a person, the person would bow and greet respectfully, "Mistress." Even elders with gray-white hair would also have to bow respectfully and greet her mistress with an extremely humble expression and tone. Granny C's expression turned darker and continued on without saying a word while grabbing Qin Mu's hand to disabled elderly village. Along the way, Qin Mu was astonished and didn't know what was going on as he heard mistress a few hundred times. Reaching the village entrance, village chief and apothecary were drinking tea. In front of them was a youth who was enjoying his tea slowly, as well with an elder standing by his side. Mistress, the elder bowed. The youth raised his head, but his voice was unspeakably old as he calmly said, You, aren't you going greet patriarch when you see me? Granny C's body turned stiff as she stopped in her steps and bowed. Greetings, patriarch. Elder of Discipline looked at Qin Mu and revealed a smile, so much that his eyes were almost closed. Mistress, is this your son? Granny C stared at him and retorted ruthlessly, Stop talking nonsense or I'll tear your mouth apart. Moore was picked up by me. He isn't my son. The elder of discipline gave an understanding look that made Granny C itching to beat up him. Apothecary smiled. Granny, our good friends from Heavenly Devil Cult have been here for a few days and refused to leave as they have not seen you. Granny C's expression turned even darker. Moore, return to the village first. You too, Granny, village chief said indifferently. Granny C frowned as village chief said softly. Since you had entered our disabled elderly village, you are one of us now. Your problems, we in the disabled elderly village would take on with you. The youth in front of him drank his tea and smiled slightly. You are still as aggressive as ever, brother. This matter concerns our cult master, cult mistress, and our holy Bible. Even if disabled elderly village wants to take on this matter, I doubt you could be able to do it. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 52. Sold for a good price. Village chief raised his eyebrows and said, If we end up in a life and death struggle, I'm afraid the Heavenly Devil Cult would have to suffer a great loss, right? So why must we put pressure and be hard on each other? If the strength of your cult was to be cut greatly because of us disabled elderly, I bet the Imperial Preceptor would be glad to see it happen and take the chance to bring the Heavenly Devil Cult into his hands. What do you think? The young patriarch nodded. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is indeed looking for a chance to subdue our cult and make us pay allegiance to the Imperial family. However, with the Holy Bible of our sacred cult missing and our sacred cult master being killed, we are no different from an exterminated cult. If brother remains obstinate, I'm afraid the little village which brother is protecting would have to clash with our sacred cult. Unfold the flags. The elder of discipline beside him bowed and replied, Yes, patriarch. Unfold the flags. All 360 hall masters took out huge flagpoles and unfolded their flags with a swish, letting the flags fluttered with the wind. Qin Mu took a look and saw the 360 flags becoming wider and wider. Every flag had an area of 7 aries. Put away the flags, the youth said. Elder of discipline shouted, Put away the flags. The huge flags were put away, and as the surfaces of the flags vanished, Qin Mu saw tens of thousands of divine arts practitioners behind the flags. Each and every one of them had an imposing appearance and stood upright like spears. Without making a sound, they gave off a sense of incomparable austere. Village chief sighed. The teleportation flag of Heavenly Devil Cult surely lives up to its name. Just by unfolding and putting away the huge flags, tens of thousand divine arts practitioners had directly entered great ruins. It's no wonder why Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor wants to subdue the Heavenly Devil Cult for himself. If he was to obtain the divine arts of Heavenly Devil Cult, Eternal Peace Empire's army would sweep the whole world and conquer all the countries. Young Patriarch sighed. Without a cult master, our sacred cult is merely like a sheet of loose sand today. For the past 40 years, our Heavenly Devil Cult has been in a more and more precarious situation. I reckon that the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would be unable to bear it anymore and lay his hands on our cult. You and I are the same. We're both getting old and have not much days left. Now I could only hope that we can choose an outstanding new cult master. Village chief's gaze flickered and said, And so the cult mistress who had killed the old cult master on their wedding night is your best candidate? Young patriarch nodded his head with a bitter smile. Brother, you should also know how hard it is to choose an outstanding cult master with wise. There may be a lot of followers in our Heavenly Devil Cult, but not many are capable of taking over the role of cult master. Furthermore, for one to be able to match up to cult mistress is even impossible. Having no alternatives left, we could only search for cult mistress and welcome her back to the cult to take over the role as cult master. Village chief looked at Granny C with his head aching. I have heard that this cult mistress had killed your cult master, Li Tianqing. So why do you want her to assume the role of cult master instead of seeking revenge for the old cult master? Isn't a huge disgrace to your cult when your cult master was killed? The eyes of young patriarch brightened as he smiled. Brother, don't forget that we are a devil cult and can't be surmised with logic. Since the new cult master had killed the old cult master, it just means that the new cult master is more capable, therefore we naturally have to support her. Village chief, as well as Qin Mu and apothecary who were by the side, had queer expressions. There's actually such a rule in heavenly devil cult? Is there such a rule, Granny? Apothecary asked. Granny C nodded her head in a daze. Apothecary can't help asking, since there's this rule, why didn't you stay in heavenly devil cult to be the new cult master after killing the old cult master? Granny C replied with acerbity. After I had killed him, I had no face to remain in heavenly devil cult. If I remained there, the devil in my heart would get worse. Apothecary still didn't understand. From his understanding, it was already difficult to understand why heavenly devil cult had spent 40 years to look for the enemy that had killed the cult master to be the new cult master. It was even much more difficult to understand why Granny C still had to hide and avoid them. Village chief gave a slight smile and told the young patriarch, if Granny doesn't want to go with you, you can't take her away. Young patriarch frowned. I will be bringing back both cult mistress and the great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Both men stared at each other. Village chief raised his teacup to see the visitor out. If the visitors don't leave, I guess I'll have to exterminate them. There are too many people in heavenly devil cult, so I wouldn't be making coffins for them. The people from our generation are getting lesser and lesser. I really can't bear to do this. Young patriarch raised his teacup and drank it all before placing it back down, rising from his chair. Same goes for me. However, there are lesser people in your village. I can arrange for the coffins. Hold it. Granny C suddenly spoke and smiled. Village chief, apothecary, return to the village first. I'll have a talk with patriarch. If things go sour, we'll then have a life and death struggle. If things go well, isn't it great that everyone is happy? Village chief gave Granny C a glance and she smiled back. Don't worry. At most I'll just be abducted by them. Village chief nodded his head. Apothecary Muir, we shall go back first. Granny C waited for them to return to the village before sitting down in front of the young patriarch and commanded, you may withdraw discipline. Yes, mistress. Elder of discipline bowed and slowly withdrew. With her bright eyes, Granny C looked at the young patriarch as he sighed. You were originally our cult saintess. Your magnificent aptitude was also peerless in your generation. I actually objected when Li Tianqing had wanted to marry you. But you didn't stop him. Granny C sneered. Li Tianqing is my master, and it is against the ethics of a human relationship for a master to marry his disciple. Our sacred cult claims ourselves to be saints, and yet are we throwing away the ethics of human relationship? Young patriarch frowned. I knew something was wrong when Li Tianqing wanted to take you as his disciple. I was afraid the more time he spent with you, he would be completely smitten by you and lose his wisdom. And as expected, he was so smitten by you that he discarded his old wife that had been married to him for a few hundred years just to marry you. Granny C grinded the remnants of her teeth and chuckled. If you know that he'll be smitten by me, then why did you let him take me as his disciple? You should be the one taking me as your disciple, patriarch. If I was your disciple, all these things wouldn't have happened. I was afraid the more time I spent with you, I would be smitten as well. Young patriarch gave a bitter smile. When I first saw you, you were only 13 years old, yet my heart pounded violently for a few beats. It was then I knew I couldn't take you as my disciple. I was already old. I didn't want my famed reputation in my lifetime to be ruined in your hands. I would be mocked by everyone if a master ended up loving his disciple. He gave a sigh and continued. It's rare for people to not be smitten by you once they see your true appearance. The longer they spend time with you, the deeper they sink. Granny C continued to grind her teeth and asked with a vague smile on her lips, "If that's the case, why do you still want me to be the cult master? Aren't you afraid I would ruin the sacred cult?" Young Patriarch replied, "You're the best candidate. I also feel that you, being a femme fatale, would definitely raise a havoc in our sacred cult when you become the cult master. For the past 40 years, while searching for you, we had also found a few youths with outstanding talents. However, they were all not as good as you. They were all still slightly lacking to be the cult master." He gave another sigh and continued depressedly, "Once you've seen the best, you'll always feel something is lacking when you see other good ones. I'll not go back." Granny C grinned, "But I can return you a cult master which comes along with the cult's legacy Holy Bible, great educational heavenly devil scriptures." Young Patriarch's expression wavered as he asked, "Return us a cult master? What do you mean by that?" In the disabled elderly village, Qin Mu, village chief, apothecary, and the rest gazed steadily at every action Granny C and Devil Cult Patriarch made. It was surprisingly unexpected when both of them seemed to have an enjoyable conversation as they heard laughter and chattering. As Granny C and Devil Cult Patriarch were talking, Granny C suddenly looked back to the village, which was followed by Devil Cult Patriarch, who revealed a smile before turning around to say something to Granny. After a while, Granny C walked back into the village with small steps and smiled. "It's done. It's done." Everyone had a queer expression. Cripple, who was suspicious, asked with his face brimming with smiles, "When do we start fighting?" "There's no need to fight." Granny C gave a few blinks. "However, they will be staying here for a short while and leave after a few days." Everyone became stern. For the heavenly devil cult to leave only after a while, what exactly are they planning? Granny C grinned and continued, "Old Ma, Moore said his overlord body vital chi had the attribute of green dragon. You can check if he had any improvement." "The overlord body vital chi can imitate green dragon vital chi as well?" Old Ma was astonished. "Moore, quickly come here to spar with me." Qin Mu immediately went over. As Apothecary looked at the two people exchanging blows, he shifted over to Granny C and whispered, "Granny, did you sold Moore?" Granny C gave a few innocent blink and replied unflinchingly, "Why do you say that? How would I sell Moore? How much did you sold him for?" Cripple came forward and asked curiously. "Devil Cult Young Cult Master." Granny C was decrepit as she sighed. "Let them put a title on him first. I will be giving away the cult's legacy Devil Bible, great educational heavenly devil scriptures as well. They'll see how well he grows in the future. If it's pleasing enough, then he would officially be the sacred cult master. How's this price?" Cripple's eyes lit up and his breathing became ragged. "Such a good deal? Why didn't you find me earlier, Granny? You can sell me instead." Granny C smiled. "It's easy if you want to be the sacred cult master of heavenly devil cult. You just have to take a walk in the neighboring village and meet all 360 hall masters as well as 12 cult protector elders, left and right guardians, for great cult heavenly kings, 8 great inspectors, and a devil cult patriarch." Cripple's face turned as white as ashes. For Moore to become the young cult master, he will also have to suffer one round in the village next door? Granny C sighed helplessly. They want to check the goods first. Without checking the goods, how would they be at ease to make him the young cult master of heavenly devil cult? Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 53, Demonstration of Power. In that case, you're going to impart the heavenly devil cult's legacy Bible, the great educational heavenly devil scriptures, to Moore? Cripple asked. Granny C nodded her head gently and replied, "He's better than me. Heavenly devil creation technique is one of the divine arts in great educational heavenly devil scriptures. I use the technique to strip skins and make clothing, thus being somewhat evil, but I've never thought of using heavenly devil creation technique to counter sunshine refining Yang soul in the sky of thunderclap 8 strikes. He was the one who did." Apothecary nodded. It was indeed the perfect counter, using the heavenly devil creation technique to bind his soul to himself against sunshine refining Yang soul in the sky. Granny C smiled. Therefore, if he learned the great educational heavenly devil scriptures, he could probably bring the devil Bible to glory and master some things that we had never thought of. Mute let out a few sounds and hand signs, but Deaf shook his head. Let's not tell him. If we tell him, it wouldn't be as interesting. The bunch of elderly laughed happily together in agreement. In disabled elderly village, sounds of thunder rumbled out. Qin Mu and Old Ma's figures clashed against each other as they both executed Tempest of the 9 Dragons at each other. Boom! The rolling thunder deafened one's ears as Qin Mu and Old Ma's fist collided. With a grunt, Qin Mu fell back with his footsteps like coiled up a divine dragon. It looked like he was falling back, but he was actually accumulating strength in his legs. In just a few steps, Qin Mu had accumulated the maximum amount of strength in his legs, and he burst forward at Old Ma like a raging dragon flying out from the abyss. Rascal! He even changed the heaven-pilfering footwork that I had taught him. Cripple astonishingly exclaimed. He could see the footwork that Qin Mu had just used was like a coiling dragon shrinking back its body to accumulate strength for its strike. It may look like he was falling back, but in actual fact, he was falling back in order to advance, making it abnormally sinister. His heaven-pilfering footwork was exquisite beyond compare, but Cripple was used to using it to show off and steal, paying no attention on how to raise the power of heaven-pilfering footwork. Cripple's footwork was mostly used for escaping after stealing and assassinating. Offense was not what heaven-pilfering leg skill was good at. Qin Mu had made slight changes to his footwork and subconsciously incorporated the spirit of the divine dragon, making his body motion having the momentum of a dragon, just like a serpentine dragon. Bang, bang, bang. A series of collision sounds resonated out. Qin Mu and Old Ma had only exchanged a single punch, yet it was very weird as 45 loud sounds resonated out. Qin Mu flew backward. In midair, his body twisted like a moving dragon, getting rid of Old Ma's strength and landed steadily on the ground. Old Ma is still Old Ma, Cripple exclaimed in admiration. Old Ma said, Muer, have you comprehended the essence of this move? Qin Mu revealed a startled expression and cried out, The force of your fist is different from mine. The 45 dragons in the force of my fist were all the same dragons, whereas there are 45 kinds of divine dragons in the force of your fist, with each and every one of the dragon force being different. You have comprehended it. Old Ma gave off a gratified expression. In the Great Thunderclap Monastery, there are 100 relief sculptures of heavenly dragons called the 100 Dragons Portraits. These portraits were sculpted by the first-generation Rulai after seeing 100 kinds of dragons for himself, providing the disciples of the future generations with a mean to cultivate the fist force of Tempest of the 9 Dragons. When I was cultivating Tempest of the 9 Dragons, what I saw wasn't a real dragon but these relief sculptures. Tempest of the 9 Dragons contains 45 kinds of dragon forces and requires 45 dragon portraits, yet there are 100 different kinds of dragon portraits in Great Thunderclap Monastery. Do you know what this means? Qin Mu's heart jolted and cried out, Every time you execute Tempest of the 9 Dragons, the dragon force in your fist would be different from the previous. Old Ma nodded his head. Tempest of the 9 Dragons may look like a simple punch, but it actually concealed countless of variation within it. However, these variations are hidden in the strength that's accumulated in the fist, therefore people are unable to tell. Take a good look, Muer. Old Ma gave a punch with his only arm, and the roar of a dragon resonated out, which was followed by the rumblings of thunder. A dragon-shaped vital chi surged forth, and the rush of the raging dragon was like a dragon breaking out from the lagoon and wanting to eat people. It was then followed by 2 dragon roars as 2 dragons rushed out from his fist, twisting around one another. With the bodies of the 2 huge dragons coiling around each other, they drilled forward continuously. 3 dragon roars reverberated out as the 3 kinds of overbearing and ferocious dragon forces split monuments and shattered rocks. It was then followed by 4 dragons pounce, 5 dragons devil purge, 6 dragons reincarnation, 7 dragons thrashing the sea, 8 divisions heavenly dragons, and 9 dragons tempest. Old Ma's punch unleashed 45 dragon-shaped fist forces, and they were all realistic and vivid, just like real dragons. He had unleashed his punch towards the sky, and 45 green dragons appeared in the sky above disabled elderly village. The 45 green dragons flew into the sky while accompanied by thunderclaps and crisscrossing bolts of lightning. Qin Mu raised his head and saw a cloud dissipating and vanished in the skies. The cloud dissipated and a human head suddenly fell from the dissipated cloud and landed beside Qin Mu's legs. Qin Mu jumped in shock and saw that it was a monk's head, which he had no idea why it was hiding in the clouds. Could it be some demon had killed this monk and brought his head into the clouds? Just as Qin Mu was guessing, a few more thuds came and he saw 2 arms and 2 legs landing on the ground with the torso landing outside of the village. It's not the works of a demon. Qin Mu's heart shook. The monk was hiding in the clouds. Mute, deaf, butcher and the rest of them in the village were used to see strange occurrences, so they paid no attention to it. Old Ma didn't seem to realize he had killed a monk and raised his head to look at Devil Cult Patriarch in the eye, demonstrating his prowess. A demonstration of power to Devil Cult Patriarch and to intimidate many of the strong practitioners of Heavenly Devil Cult. In the neighboring village, the young patriarch had a slight change in expression. The divine arts of Great Thunderclap Monastery is indeed remarkable, but it's still slightly lacking in experience compared to old Rulai. I know who the one arm is. The relinquished disciple on Great Thunderclap Monastery, Ma Wangshan, Venerable Ma. Back then he fought his way out of Great Thunderclap Monastery, making a name for himself. I didn't expect him to live in seclusion here. We can't look down on this little village. Elder of Discipline looked at the body that had fallen from the sky. This is a monk of Great Thunderclap Monastery which was killed by Ma Wangshan. This is weird. Why is a monk from Great Thunderclap Monastery doing here? The young patriarch smiled. He's probably stationed here to keep an eye out for Ma Wangshan. This is a small matter. Rulai is old and will no longer leave the mountain. On the other hand, the youth's fist skills are pretty interesting and had a high standard. He clearly hasn't learned Rulai's Mahayana scripture yet. He can unleash the full power of Thunderclap 8 strikes. In the village, Old Ma retracted his gaze and continued, Mu'er, what did you see in my punch? Qin Mu held back his questions. Not only were the shapes and sizes of the 45 green dragons different, even the species of the dragons were totally different, truly a shocking sight for Qin Mu. Suddenly, Old Ma once again executed Tempest of the 9 dragons. 45 different green dragons surged into the skies, violently raising the wind and clouds, which was accompanied by lightning and thunder. Old Ma gave off punch after punch, increasing the amount of the dragon-shaped fist force in the skies. Within a radius of 30 miles, it was densely packed with green dragons dancing in the breeze. The green dragons formed a gorgeous formation in the skies, with their bodies intertwining each other to form a gigantic dragon coil. With the dragon's head facing outwards, it gave out a loud roar, the roar of 10,000 dragons shaking the heaven and earth. This was no longer demonstrating to Qin Mu the profundity of Tempest of the 9 dragons and was instead a bare demonstration of power. Demonstrating his power to great ruins, demonstrating his power to Heavenly Devil Cult and demonstrating his power to everyone that harbors ill intentions to disabled elderly village. Qin Mu gawked at the sight. The others in the village were full of admiration as they nodded repeatedly. The followers of Heavenly Devil Cult in the neighboring village had a slight change in their expression as they admired endlessly. Young Patriarch instructed the cult followers beside him, "Show some courtesy next time if any of you meet Ma Wangshan alone." Elder of Discipline whispered, "Do our Heavenly Devil Cult need to be scared of a small village like this?" "Scared is an overstatement." Young Patriarch smiled slightly. "They are already disabled and crippled. Their abilities are no longer what they used to. However, there are still 2 of them that are on the same level as me. One of them is the limbless man and the other one is the blacksmith. The rest of them are slightly stronger than our 12 cult protector elders and our 4 great cult heavenly kings. I'm afraid Saintus is the weakness of them all. Do you see the butcher with only the upper half of his body left? If you have seen him before, he will definitely leave a deep impression on you, because he had a title called Heaven Knife." Elder of Discipline's heart tremored as he looked at Butcher with disbelief while muttering, "That's Heaven Knife? Wasn't he already dead? I had also heard that he died." A cult protector elder chipped in. "I've heard that he went insane and pointed his knife at the heavens, slaughtering his way up. Someone saw the figures of gods in the skies and this lunatic slaughtered his way up to them. From what I've heard, The skies were filled with dark clouds at that time, and the knife lights pierced through the thunderclouds. Not long after, Heaven Knife's corpse fell out from the sky. If this butcher is indeed that Heaven Knife, how exactly did he survive? Young Patriarch replied, with a being like him, it's hard for him to die even if he wanted to die. Elder of Discipline asked puzzledly, Patriarch, why did you agree, Cult Mistress, to make this little kid our young cult master? I don't see anything spectacular in his power. This youth's power is indeed not particularly spectacular and is still a greenhorn as of now. However, who are those people around him? Young Patriarch beamed. The strong practitioners around him are exceptionally terrifying. They were all all-powerful beings that have their own talents. This youth is their child, and they'll impart everything they had learned in their lifetime to him. In addition, with me teaching him our cult's great educational heavenly devil scriptures, if he becomes the sacred cult master of our cult, it would be our sacred cult's prophet. Elder of Discipline gave a gasp of admiration and asked, Brilliant Patriarch. However, why does Patriarch wants to test him? Patriarch asked him back, what if he is a dumbass? Therefore, there's still a need for a test. Inform all 360 Hall Masters that they are only to use their abilities of Spirit Embryo Realm. We'll wait for him to enter the village tomorrow. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 54, 360 Houses. In the village, Old Ma retracted his fist and asked Qin Mu, Did you understand what you saw? I understood. Qin Mu pondered over it. Every kind of dragon force represents a different type of strength. By arranging the dragon forces in a different sequence, the force of the fist would be different. With 100 different green dragons in the force of the fist, once the sequence is messed up, Tempest of the 9 dragons would have countless of variations. Once someone else received my first punch, they definitely can't use the same method to receive my second punch. Even if I unleash 100 or 1,000 punches, the strength in each and every punch would never be the same. Old Ma revealed a rare smile. Previously, your overlord body didn't have any attributes, thus you couldn't cultivate Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. Furthermore, I had promised Great Thunderclap Monastery to not impart out Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. Now that your overlord body has the attribute of the green dragon, I'll still not impart it to you. However, if you are able to completely comprehend the truth of the fists, it doesn't matter if you learn Rulai's Mahayana Sutra or not. You have already obtained the dragon's grace, form, might, aura, and spirit, so even if you had never seen the 100 dragons' portraits, you can still figure out the marvel of the 100 dragons' portraits. With your Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, the power of your Thunderclap 8 strikes will be no inferior to Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. Qin Mu's spirit pumped up. Old Ma was usually cold-hearted and rarely praised others. Therefore, he was very happy to receive Old Ma's praise. In addition, Old Ma's words gave him inspiration and inspired more ideas in him. If Dragon Force was the main point in Tempest of the 9 Dragons, then what about the first form, Spring Thunder, on the lonely East Sea? Could he grasp the essence of this form by observing the rise and fall of the large river surging into the sea and listening to the rumble of spring thunder? And was Thunder Fingers of the pipa player related to music temperament? There's also Quafa chasing the sun and Sunshine refining Yang Soul in the sky. They must have their own methods of comprehension. The more he thought, the more he became excited and couldn't wait to leave the village immediately to roam the world, to observe the wonders of the world and view the mysterious principles of nature. Remember to wake up early tomorrow and go to the neighboring village to pay your respects. Granny C beamed. Qin Mu was puzzled. Granny, the people in the neighboring village are from Heavenly Devil Cult. Why do they call you mistress? Why do they want to make you cult master? Why are they going to kill us if you don't listen to them? Granny C caressed his head and smiled. You'll know in the future. Early next morning, after Qin Mu had breakfast and washed up, he went to pick up another egg only to meet the fury of the hen dragon, which fought equally with Qin Mu. Flapping its wings up and down, it used its sword-like feathers to cut down the egg thief while releasing a fire breath. With the green dragon coiling around his body, Qin Mu executed Thunder Fingers of the pipa player to block the sword feathers. Mu'er, Stop fighting with it and go pay your respects in the village next door," Granny C said as she walked over and chased away the hen dragon. Qin Mu immediately followed her. The hen dragon, which was left behind, came chasing after Qin Mu again, but it was scared away by Granny C's ominous glare. Granny C brought him to the village next door, and the Elder of Discipline came to welcome them. As he was measuring Qin Mu, he told Granny C, "Cult Mistress, everything is prepared properly. Young Master is just required to walk through all 360 rooms once, and that's all." Granny C blinked her eyes in disbelief. To pass all 360 rooms in a single try? Isn't that asking too much? Elder of Discipline smiled. "If he can't pass all 360 rooms, I would have to ask Cult Mistress to come back with us." Granny gritted her teeth and asked, "Can he rest?" "Feel free to rest. There are food and drinks in the room, as well as beds, medicine, spirit pills, and everything that he needs." Granny C took a look at Qin Mu and gritted her teeth again. "Muer, go through all 360 rooms to pay them a visit. Remember to call them senior brothers and senior sisters. There's no need to call them seniors." Qin Mu nodded as he walked towards the first house and smiled. 360 rooms. I wonder how long will it take for me to visit them all. "Granny, I'll be going in." Granny C looked at his back and suddenly asked, "Muer, do you know what will you face after you go in?" Qin Mu turned back and smiled. "I know. I won't let them take Granny away." Granny felt a warmth in her heart as she turned back to leave. When she had picked up this child from the river back then, she had never expected the day would come when the baby back then would help her share her burden. Qin Mu walked into the first level of the first house and saw the room was pretty wide. Inside there was a yellow-faced man. His face was so yellow that it looked like he had just eaten a gallbladder. On his chin was a comb of mountain goat beard, and on his hand was an abacus, making him look like a bookkeeper doing accounting. "Senior brother." Qin Mu stood still and first paid his respects before removing all his weapons from his back and placed them at the door. "Senior brother, please." The bookkeeper looked at the 11 to 12 years old boy in astonishment and asked engrossingly, "You know what you're here for? Could it be that Cult Mistress had told you?" Qin Mu stretched his body and his vital chi surged forward as he smiled. There's no need for Granny to say it clearly, as I knew it naturally, as power burst forth beneath his feet. He reached face to face with the bookkeeper in just a step. With the rumbling of thunder from his palm, the youth's vital chi was unusually intense, like fire. "Don't I just have to fight my way through from the first room to the 360th room? The bookkeeper immediately raised his hand to block and felt a giant force bashing him, causing him to uncontrollably fly back and crash into the wooden wall behind him, falling into the courtyard. He stabilized himself after sliding dozens of yards. He was astonished and angry at the same time as he looked through the hole in the wall to see Qin Mu walking to the door to pick up his weapons before proceeding to the next room. "Why am I sulking at a child?" The bookkeeper broke into laughter from his anger soon after and shouted loudly to the others in the wooden building, "The rest of you better be careful. This little kid is very shrewd. His vital chi at Spirit Embryo Realm is extremely dense and is at least 2 times higher than mine at Spirit Embryo Realm. Take care not to fail miserably. Denser than yours by 2 times? A tinkling female voice rang out in astonishment. With this kind of cultivation, as expected of the young master. However, I wonder how his spells are. Qin Mu walked to the next house and pushed open the door. In the room was a scholar swaying his head as he was enthralled by the book in his hand. "Senior brother," Qin Mu greeted. The scholar gave a wary expression and smiled. "You're going to land a sneak attack on me when I return your greeting? I'm not giving you the chance to." Chi Kuduo. Boom! The sound of thunder burst forth and violent tremors could be felt. Splinters filled the air as the scholar flew backward, shattering the woods and into a towering tree. The scholar landed on the ground and warned in a loud voice, "Be careful. This little brat has powerful abilities and is proficient in the incantation of the devil, which is even more unpredictable than our sacred cult's incantation." Boom! Just as he had finished warning, a senile private tutor flew out from the wooden building and tumbled onto a stone pillar, unable to restrain his anger. "Bullshit! I was tricked by you and only focused on defending his devil incantation, giving him the chance to use Great Thunderclap Monastery's techniques to almost injure my soul. Don't be tricked. He uses the Thunderclap 8 strikes of Great Thunderclap Monastery. Bullshit. An angry female voice sounded out from the 4th house. Old Xie, you sabotaged me. What he used was the Heavenly Devil Nature technique to seal my 3 souls and 7 spirits. Don't you dare run away after touching me all over and spoiling my reputation, little brat. Qin Mu's face turned slightly red as he walked out of the 4th room. The hand technique of Heavenly Devil Nature technique required to touch the other person's perineum, chest, and navel. These 3 spots were the private parts of a woman. Therefore, it was not easy for Qin Mu to do it. It was very obscene, especially at the perineum. I'm still too young to understand all these. The cowherd boy of disabled elderly village blinked his eyes innocently as he said silently to himself. In the 5th room, a man who was skinny like a bag of bones looked at Qin Mu as he walked over and sneered. No matter what kinds of devil methods you use, you can forget about passing through me. Victory Loathing Golden Toad Technique. As he walked to Qin Mu, he took in a deep breath at the same time, creating a croaking sound. The sound grew louder and actually sounded like the croaking of toads. Qin Mu was startled. The skinny body of the Heavenly Devil Cult's Hall Master gradually bloated up. His original skin, which was like a bag of bones, slowly inflated into sturdy muscles with the more air he sucked in. The Victory Loathing Golden Toad technique walked path of demon transformation to imitate the Victory Loathing Golden Toad. Victory Loathing Golden Toad was a unique breed in the strange beasts. Normally, it was only as big as a washbowl, but when it was puffed up with air, its body could be expanded up to 100 times bigger, and it even could swallow ferocious tigers and lions in one bite. Once he executed Victory Loathing Golden Toad technique of Heavenly Devil Cult, his strength would become limitless and his vital chi would become especially dense. The degree of enhancement wasn't as terrifying as the Golden Toad, but it was still no small matter. As the Heavenly Devil Cult's Hall Master took in a deep breath, Qin Mu was also sucking in air as well. However different from Victory Loathing Golden Toad technique, his chest didn't bloat up, but the breath he took in was terrifying. Almost all the air in front of him was sucked up by him, causing the air at the sides to fill up the void. This actually resulted in a small breeze in the wooden building which even shook the windows. The Hall Master's vital chi became extremely violent as he finished taking in his breath. His whole body was bulging with muscles that were like rocks, stretching his shirt so much that it seemed that it could split apart anytime soon. His body also gradually grew higher until it reached 4 yards, making him seem like a small giant, whereas Qin Mu's body remained the same without any changes. Victory Loathing Golden Toad technique had a matchless strength and could shatter you in one punch. Croak! The Hall Master raised his palm and it became as big as a palm leaf fan and as red as blood. With a blood-red glow shining in the room, the air nearly exploded with his punch that was aimed at Qin Mu. Similarly, Qin Mu gave a punch as well. The big and small fists collided into one another and in that instant, the whole wooden building tremored violently. The Hall Master gave a grunt as moved a step back. The muscle on his arm squirmed as if a dragon had tunneled in and was traveling under his skin towards his heart at a rapid speed. His expression changed as he raised his other arm, chopped down on his arm to split the dragon in half. With another step back, his arm bulged again and it seemed like 2 dragons were squirming under his skin, causing him to quickly chop down again. When he took his 4th step back, the wall behind him was shattered and with his 5th step, he had landed on the ground outside the building. He took another 4 steps back and leaned on a huge tree which suddenly trembled violently. The trunk of the tree was reduced to powder as the crown of the tree collapsed. With the wood shavings flying around the air, a picture of 9 dragons controlling the tempest surged out from the back of this Hall Master, which was accompanied by thunder and light as well as the furious roar of 9 dragons. He wasn't able to intercept the 9th layer of force from Tempest of the 9 Dragons. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 55. Number 1 Sword Skill in the World. I'm Rain Hall Master of our sacred cult and people called me Little Rainbringer. Are you good in your spells? Qin Mu walked into the next room and there was a woman inside. On her face were strange tattoos, and on her head was a victory headdress made from feathers. On her hand was a staff made from an unknown beast's tail that had 24 joints to correspond to the 24 solar terms. The woman smiled. "We shall compete using our spells in this room." Qin Mu shook his head. "I don't know any spells. Can practitioners of the spirit embryo realm learn spells too?" The woman smiled. "Why not? Vital Qi is magic power, and you can cast spells once you know spells. Cult Mistress was the best spellcaster in our cult. Didn't she teach you? When I was in the spirit embryo realm, I had already traveled around in the martial world to bring rain by spells for the commoners. Whenever there was a drought, the commoners would invite me over to help them. Therefore they called me a witch. However, as my cultivation grew stronger and had a greater reputation, they then called me Little Rainbringer. I'm indebted to the cult master for thinking highly of me and bestowing me as the hall master of Rain Hall. However, I'm still inferior compared to the cult mistress. Back then, she was the one who had become saintess and not me." Qin Mu was bewildered. "How do I fight using spells?" Rain Hall Master put her hand on her forehead and sighed. "Why don't you know anything? The dispute between the school of spells and the school of battle techniques has existed down through the ages. Before, people cultivating spells and people cultivating battle techniques always fought to the death against each other. The two schools recognized each other as heresy and wanted to kill off each other. Now everyone may be living together in harmony, but in the past, if you run to a divine arts practitioner and say you cultivate battle techniques, you would be diced in pieces in the next instant. The battle prowess of spellcasters is much powerful than you imagine." Qin Mu asked curiously, "Are sword control techniques considered spells?" "No, they aren't." Rain Hall Master shook her head. Sword control techniques were considered battle techniques in the past. However, they later claimed that they were the true path and that people who cultivated spells and battle techniques were going down the unorthodox path, thus they had to die. This was why Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor held a conference and challenged all the strong practitioners of battle techniques, crippling them. "Didn't Cult Mistress tell you these?" Qin Mu frowned. "Why are they always fighting? Aren't battle techniques, sword arts, and spells all divine arts? Isn't it better to gather all their advantages together as one?" Rain Hall Master didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A person's energy is limited. How does one have the time to cultivate all three styles to a profound realm? One could use up their life and wisdom just by meticulously studying a single style and still could hardly cultivate it to its peak. Since people are cultivating different things, there would be competition on who's better, which would result in that they're unable to coexist with one another. Qin Mu raised his spirit and asked, "Elder sister, show me some spells. I have never seen spells before." Rain Hall Master raised her slender white hand and pointed her 5 fingers down. With a raise and a tremor, mist started to form in the room and it began to rain. Qin Mu observed closely and saw that after the raindrops fell on the ground, they flew up the sides of the walls to create an endless cycle. Rain Hall Master waved her hand and the raindrops clearly became lines just like the strings of an instrument. Opening up all 10 of her fingers, she strummed the rain lines, causing music to resonate throughout the room. In the music, the rain transformed into a flood dragon rushing towards Qin Mu. Qin Mu stretched his hand out and grabbed onto the weakness of the water flood dragon, crushing it with a splash. Rain Hall Master was astonished and strummed the musical strings even faster, turning the raindrops into sharp weapons that flew toward Qin Mu in all directions at an insane speed. The temperature in the air rapidly decreased and froze the rainwater into ice, making the sharp weapons even more treacherous. With his 10 fingers flicking after one another, Qin Mu shattered the sharp weapons that were flying to him. "So these are spells. Elder sister, is this move considered a spell too?" His hands suddenly ignited with blazing flames, and with his hands as knives, he swung his knives continuously and blew Rain Hall Master away. Rain Hall Master landed in the courtyard, and her angry yet startled voice cried out, "You are a heretic of the battle technique faction, to use battle techniques as spells." Walking into the next room, Qin Mu saw a burly man with a stubbly beard as he sat in Saiza. Beside him was a rectangular sword case with a bronze buckle firmly fastened around it. I'm the hall master of the sword hall. The burly man didn't rise up and remained incisa as he said, You're carrying a sword pouch, therefore you should know sword skills. We shall compete in our sword skill today. Qin Mu shook his head. I never learned sword skills before. The sword hall master raised his head in astonishment. If you never learned sword skills before, then why are you carrying a sword pouch? Did cult mistress not teach you anything about sword skill? Qin shook his head and answered, Granny said in the village there was a man with #1 sword skill in the world. Therefore, she couldn't teach heavenly devil cult sword skills to me in case it would cause the person not to teach me in the future. #1 sword skill in the world? The sword hall master stared with wide-open eyes. His sharp eyes were like 2 rays of sword light penetrating into Qin Mu's heart as he laughed coldly. Who dares to be so arrogant? Go learn a move from him. I want to see what the so-called #1 sword skill in the world can do against ours from our sacred cult. Qin Mu blinked his eyes innocently and said, I have also learned other skills like thunderclap 8 strikes, heaven pilfering divine legs, pig slaughtering knife skills, spear skill, painting, hammer skills. The sword hall master caressed his sword case gently and demanded coldly, I only want to see the #1 sword skill in the world. The rest is all crap. Qin Mu could only walk out of the wooden building helplessly and return to disabled elderly village, explaining to Granny C what had happened. Granny C angrily grumbled, Sword Hall is such an inflexible brute. Same goes for you, Moor. Just use your knife to hack him into pieces. Qin Mu mumbled, That would be an unfair fight. Granny C held his hand and brought him back to the gate of the village. At the gate, village chief and apothecary were still brewing tea while the young patriarch sat in front of them. The 3 of them drank together. Village chief, the sword hall master is persistent to have a sword skill contest with Qin Mu. Granny C beamed. Why don't you teach him a thing or two? Village chief frowned and shook his head. In such a short time, it will still be difficult to win the opponent even with my guidance. After all, nobody knows how many years the sword hall master has been immersed in the study of sword skills. He should probably have got some achievement of his own. You want me to teach Moor a thing or two, and then he would be able immediately to win the sword hall master. Isn't it like reaching for the stars? But it's a good thing Moor is an overlord body, am I right? Granny C blinked his eyes innocently. Overlord body. The corners of village chief's eyes started twitching, and he was starting to regret what he had done. After all, he was the one who insisted that Moor was the overlord body that he had made up. Qin Mu being able to awaken his spirit embryo was already out of his expectation, but he knew there was a limit to everything. It was a Herculean task to make Qin Mu able to fight against an outstanding sword skill expert from Devil Cult in just a short time. Granny C had pushed this task to him, and he, of all people, couldn't reject her. Village chief muttered to himself for a moment before saying, Moor, recite to me the secret of Elixir Heart that you had learned from Gulin Wan. Qin Mu immediately recited out Secret of Elixir Heart once, and village chief nodded in admiration. The Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor has indeed created an accomplishment by gathering all the sword experts in the world. The sword control techniques of Secret of Elixir Heart truly have its originality. The young patriarch in front of him also sighed in admiration. The Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is a genius. Village chief continued. Tell me, how did Gu Linwan explain the Secret of Elixir Heart to you? Qin Mu repeated Gu Linwan's explanation word for word, and village chief smiled and kept silent for a while. Gu Linwan had selfishly hidden away some stuff. He pointed out the mistakes within it, and Qin Mu immediately used Qi to manipulate sword after he tried changing the mistakes that village chief had fixed, becoming very impressed after he found that controlling the sword became much easier and faster. The eyes of young patriarch lit up as he smiled. Gu Linwan didn't hide stuff selfishly. It was that his comprehension was limited and not as profound as brother. You only heard it once, and you could completely comprehend the entire profundity of Secret of Elixir Heart, whereas he who had cultivated it all his life had still cultivated wrongly. Thanks for the praise, brother. Village chief looked at Qin Mu and said in a steady pace, I shall not teach you sword skill. I shall only teach you a simple movement, which is stab. Stab. Qin Mu was stumped. Wasn't stabbing as easy as using vital chi to manipulate the sword to stab forward? Why was there a need to learn? Using the sword to stab is not as simple as you think. Even if you don't know sword skills, as long as you master the stabbing movement, not much sword skill experts in the spirit embryo realm would be able to defeat you in this world. Village chief continued. Using an ordinary sword, try using chi to manipulate the sword to stab into the pillar of the butcher's shop. Qin Mu executed Secret of Elixir Heart, and his vital chi, which was as thick as an arm, swept up a treasure sword in his sword pouch, flying towards the pillar of the butcher's shop in the village. Thud! Qin Mu stabbed through the pillar of the butcher's shop with the tip of the sword coming out from the back of the pillar. The cowherd boy then turned back to look at village chief. Village chief's expression turned stiff as he coughed. Try stabbing this rock. Qin Mu's vital chi curled and pulled the treasure sword out from the pillar, and with a clang, the sharp sword pierced through the mountain rock in front of village chief. The cowherd boy once again turned back and innocently looked at village chief, whose expression had turned totally stiff. The young patriarch felt startled and funny at the same time, however. He could only restrain his laughter as to not be impolite. I've forgotten this kid's vital chi cultivation is extremely dense. His sword skill may be utter crap, but with the support of his extremely dense vital chi, the power of his stab had increased exponentially. Village chief covered up his awkward by giving off a few coughs and continued. Trying stabbing through your pig slaughtering knife. A crisp clink sound rang out. However, Qin Mu wasn't able to pierce through the pig slaughtering knife this time. It's lucky he didn't pierce through it, else I wouldn't have any idea on how to teach him. Village chief secretly gave a sigh of relief and guided patiently. So what did you feel when you stabbed your sword? Qin Mu pondered over it carefully, and his eyes suddenly lit up. I felt that my vital chi wasn't strong enough. When using chi to manipulate sword, my vital chi was somewhat obstructed at the tip of the sword. It felt like having an entire body filled with strength, yet I'm beating someone with my hair. The vital chi thread was too flimsy and can't handle all of my strength. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 56. Stab. The young patriarch had weird expression. Qin Mu's vital chi, which was as thick as an arm, was also called a vital chi thread? Was there such a thick vital chi thread? Was there such a powerful vital chi thread? And I felt that my vital chi wasn't strong enough. He had never seen such dense vital chi cultivation in the spirit embryo realm. The youth of disabled elderly village had managed to stab through a wooden pillar that was as thick as a water barrel in one hit. He had also stabbed through a mountain rock that was 6 yards thick in one hit as well. The strength contained in his vital chi thread had far surpassed who knew how many sword cultivators of spirit embryo realm. Village chief smiled and gave advice to Qin Mu. That's right. You haven't mastered the most basic movement of the sword skills, and that is stab. What if you could focus all your strength in your stab? What if you could unleash all your strength that you have? Qin found it hard to believe and shook his head. Using chi to manipulate sword uses vital chi thread. To manipulate sword, however, vital chi thread is simply too soft. How can it unleash all of my strength? It's possible. Village chief leisurely said. Treat the sword as part of your body, just like your hand. Now raise your hand and imagine you're holding onto a sword in your hand. With your index and middle finger on the blade of the sword, stab your hand out and the blade will follow. Treat it as part of my body? Qin Mu was confused. His arm-thick vital chi once again swept up the treasure sword, with his right hand grabbing emptiness. His thumb pressed down on his ring and little finger, while his index and middle finger stretched out, just like placing them on the blade of the sword. Qin Mu gave a stab forward and heard a screech. His vital chi had brought the treasure sword to stab forward, splitting apart the air and releasing a sharp screech. He was surprised and elated. When he had used chi to manipulate sword just now, the power contained in the sword was at most 10% of his own power, and now he felt that the strength in the sword had increased by several times. Young patriarch smiled. This is called Secrets of Sword Clutch, the introductory form of cultivating sword. Just now you pierced through mountain rock without using any sword secrets. It seems like your vital chi density is much higher than mine back then. Village chief shook his hand. However, it's still not enough. Just by using Secrets of Sword Clutch, It's impossible for him to defeat experts that have cultivated sword path for several decades. Mu, let your vital qi flow out from your palm and try again. Qin Mu followed what he said and coiled the vital qi from his palm onto the treasure sword. Stirring up his vital qi, he gave a stab forward once more. Swoosh! His sword stabbed forward and raised a whirlwind with the whistling of the sharp sword in it, which was screeching. Young Patriarch's eyes twitched and immediately sensed that the power of Qin Mu's stab had been raised by 10%. It was simply formidable for Qin Mu to have such a huge enhancement with just an advice or two from the old crippled. Village chief shouted. The vital qi thread isn't supposed to coil around the sword and should be rooted in the sword. The sword is part of your body and so is your vital qi. Try again. Qin Mu's vital qi immersed into the sharp sword and fused together with it, instantly making him feel as if he had grown another arm. With this stab, he instantly felt that his strength was like a flood finding a hole to drain out. 70 to 80% of his strength managed to accumulate in his sword as he gave another stab forward. In the village, the wind whistled as the wooden pile that Butcher always used to prop himself on was split into half. Qin Mu stared blankly. His sword hadn't even touched the wooden pile yet. It was the sword wind that had split the wooden pile into two. Young Patriarch exclaimed in admiration. With just a few words from the old cripple, he was able to bring out Qin Mu's potential. He indeed had extremely high attainments in sword arts. Still not enough. Village chief continued. Your strength isn't fully unleashed. Your strength may have been used on the sword, but what about your spirit embryos? Where's the strength of your spirit embryo? The spirit embryo also has to hold the sword. Stab again. Qin Mu composed himself. In his spirit embryo divine treasure, his spirit embryo followed his movement and stabbed his fingers forward. Not good enough. Where is the secrets of elixir heart? Secrets of elixir heart not only requires you to cultivate out your elixir heart, but also to plant your elixir heart in your sword. Plant in your sword now. Still not enough again. Plant the elixir heart in your sword. That's the crucial point in Secrets of Elixir Heart. Legs to the earth is the source of strength. Use the leg techniques that Cripple had taught you to borrow strength from the earth. Where are your eyes? Where's heaven's eyes that Blind had taught you? Let your sword grow eyes too. The punches you had learned from Old Ma cultivate your muscles like a dragon. You've also seen a real dragon before. So why doesn't your sword have the majestic atmosphere of the dragon and the destruction of Old Ma's punches? Qin Mu practiced his stabbing over and over again while village chief expectation grew higher and higher. First, he requested him to adjust his own strength. Then he requested him to adjust the vital chi strength followed by the spirit embryo strength as well as incorporating Old Ma's fists and Cripple's legs into the sword skill, increasing the difficulty. In just a short while, he had stabbed countless times, however, village chief remained unsatisfied and made him continue practicing. Granny C, Cripple and the rest looked at Qin Mu who was practicing his sword and gave off expressions of shock. Every time the sword stabbed out, there would be a short and rush whistle which was followed by a violent gust that swept both sides. The flags on blacksmith, apothecary and butcher's shops fluttered backward from it. With every stab he made, a sword mark would be made on the ground. That was the outcome when the sword wind brushed past the ground. Granny C was in disbelief as she muttered. In just a short time, village chief managed to train Muir into a sword skill expert. This is simply too. Village chief shook his head. I didn't teach him any sword skill. I merely help him organize his strengths together, piece together what all of you had taught him. Now he had merely learned the basics of stabbing and still have quite a long way to go to master the true stab. Furthermore, there's still hack, curve, parry, wave, poke, jab, intercept, raise and so forth in the basic movements of swordplay. When he masters all these basic movements, could he be considered to enter the door and be qualified to learn sword skills? Muir, try stabbing your pig slaughter knife. Just as he finished speaking, Qin Mu threw his pig slaughtering knife into the air and manipulated his sword to stab it like lightning. Clank! The sharp sword met with the pig slaughtering knife and pierced through the treasure knife made from winter crystal iron. The pig slaughtering knife fell to the ground along with the sharp sword as Qin Mu stared blankly before going forward to take a look. He had no idea he could have such great improvement in just a short time. Stab, the most basic movement of sword skill, could actually have such power. Village chief's heart jolted. It was also out of his expectation that Qin Mu had been able to master stab so quickly. Muer, you can meet the sword hall master now. Hold it! The young patriarch who was in front of him hurriedly raised his hand and a wooden club flew over from the forest. Stretching a finger out, he shaved the wooden club into a wooden sword that was about a yard long and passed it to Qin Mu. Use this sword to meet him and don't use a real sword. Qin Mu took the wooden sword and took a look at Granny C. Granny C explained, Sword Hall Master had sealed his other divine treasures and only left his spirit embryo divine treasure opened. With only the cultivation of spirit embryo realm, you will stab him to death if you use a real sword. Go now. Qin Mu thought for a moment and placed his sword pouch as well as his junior protector sword at the village entrance. Carrying the wooden sword on his back, he went back into the wooden building next door to meet the Sword Hall Master. The Sword Hall Master was still sitting in Saiza with his hand on his sword case. With his piercing gaze, he asked, You're back from consulting the number one in sword skills in the world? Use what you've learned and attack me. I would like to see who could be so arrogant to claim himself as number one. Qin Mu shook his head. I didn't learn any sword skill. Village chief only taught me a movement. The Sword Hall Master frowned and said coldly, I'll give you time, go learn again. Come back and face me once you've learned a sword move. Qin Mu replied awkwardly, Your heavenly devil cult patriarch asked me to come to face you with a wooden sword instead of a real sword in case I stab you to death. Ridiculous. The air of Sword Hall Master burst forth and the surroundings were filled with an acrimonious atmosphere. There were the clashing sounds of metals among it, as if there were countless swords colliding with each other. It was the smell of iron and blood mixed together. There was the smell of rust and reek of blood mixing together. Who knew how many humans and living beings had been killed to obtain such air? His sword case unbuckled automatically and the rectangular case opened up, releasing all the treasure swords kept inside. The swords hummed loudly as they flew out joyfully. He shared the same emotions with his swords. When he was happy, his swords would be happy. When he was angry, his swords would also be angry. When he wanted to fly, his swords would bring him to the skies, and if he wanted to kill, his swords would slaughter. He was the Sword Hall Master, Sword Maniac. Now he wants to kill, and so the swords in the case flew out and in a split second, filled the entire room with sword lights. Without a thought, Qin Mu used his chi to manipulate sword and stabbed forward with secrets of sword clutch. The sword lights burst forth from the sword case and with a soft clank, the sword lights shattered into pieces. Bang! The Sword Hall Master crashed through the wall behind him in a flash and crashed onto the wooden building opposite with a wooden sword sticking out from his chest. Qin Mu jumped in shock and quickly pulled his sword back, taking a look. He only gave a sigh of relief when he saw only some blood at the tip of the sword, and it hadn't pierced through the body of the Sword Hall Master. On the opposite wooden building, the body of the Sword Hall Master slowly slid down. He dropped down faster and faster in the air and landed on the ground on his butt. His eyes were lifeless, and it seemed that he was still in a daze. Are you all right? Qin Mu waved at him. The Sword Hall Master shook his head in a daze. His body wasn't injured badly, but his spirit had been crushed. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 57. Cathouse Hall Master. Qin Mu drew back his head and walked into the next room. In the room was an alluring woman who was looking at the Sword Hall Master downstairs. Hearing Qin Mu's footsteps, she immediately turned around and said seductively, Young Master's swordplay is outstanding. You even injured Sword Maniac of Sword Hall. I'm very impressed, but my body is very delicate and not as strong as Sword Maniac. May I request young master to be gentle with me? Qin Mu blinked his eyes innocently. I'm only 11 years old and coming 12 this autumn. I don't understand what you're saying. The woman's expression turned stiff, then she burst in laughter. I thought you were the same as those stinky men and had decided to charm you, yet I had forgotten you're still young and don't know the affairs between men and women. I'm the Cathouse Hall Master of our sacred cult. In the normal days, we live in a place of entertainment and are used to small talks. I had originally wanted to use the arts of seduction, but I had made a fool out of myself. I'm impressed that young master could defeat so many hall masters at such a young age. However, I shall not be competing sword skills or fist skills. I shall be competing body techniques with you. She took out her rouge case and gently opened it, giving off a tranquilizing sweet scent. This is my favorite cardamom rouge. You and I shall stain our fingers red and compete in body movements in this room. We're only allowed to smear each other's faces, and whoever that has more finger marks on the face loses. How's that? Qin Mu nodded and smiled sweetly. All right, please go easy on me, big sister. Sweet talker. The cat house hall master burst with joy and gave him a supercilious look. She stained all her 10 fingers red and passed the rouge case to Qin Mu, who stained his 10 fingers red as well. The cat house hall master suddenly moved and her body was like a slithering snake. Her vital qi transformed into a snake tail and coiled around Qin Mu's legs. Qin Mu stared blankly. He had seen this body motion before. It was when he was at Grandma Temple where he had fought a young girl who had this kind of body motion. The young girl's vital qi had transformed into a huge snake and coiled around his body. The young girl had slithered up and down his body before getting bruised all over by his 1,000-armed Buddha. Could that girl be the disciple of this hall master? Qin Mu's feet pushed forward, and before the cat house hall master could wrap herself around him, he escaped. The woman laughed gently and slithered up the wall. Her snake tail coiled around a pillar in the room and attacked Qin Mu with her intricate finger skills. Her arms were like spirit snakes as well and could warp freely. Her 10 fingers were like 10 spirit snakes as well, and what was even peculiar was her jade-like fingers could actually stretch longer and shorter at will. Even her arms could do it too. Qin Mu then saw something even more peculiar. The cat house hall master's body could also become thin and long, so flexible as if she had no bones. She hung on the ceiling of the room like a female python. Qin Mu's leg skill was ever-changing. As he slithered to and fro on the ground like a dragon, the cat house hall master also slithered freely on the roof. With her legs on top and head below, she continuously attacked Qin Mu. Suddenly, Qin Mu's vital qi burst forth and a green dragon wrapped around his body. The green dragon stretched out its claw and dug them into the wooden walls. Executing his body techniques, he was able to travel around the walls and ceilings freely. Qin Mu gave up defense for offense and executed 1,000-armed Buddha to frantically attack the cat house hall master. In the not very big room, the two people moved swiftly like wind and lightning. No matter if they were on the walls or on the ceiling, they all moved so smoothly as if they were on flat ground. They were like a dragon and a snake fighting ferociously as they coiled and danced around peculiarly. Suddenly, the face of the cat house hall master was touched by Qin Mu and 4 finger marks appeared on her face, making her flustered. Qin Mu's hands then suddenly opened and his thunder and palm burst out in a rumble, confusing and frightening her out of her mind. When she came back to her senses, her face was already filled with finger marks. That's the end, no more. The cat house hall master slid down from the ceiling and shook her hand. That's the end. I've lost. My makeup has been smeared by you. Your body techniques are too weird, even your footsteps are weird as well. I can't catch up with you, much less wrap you up. Qin Mu also slid down and smiled. Thanks for letting me win, big sister. As the cat house hall master saw his red lips and white teeth, she couldn't help planting a kiss on his cheek and smiled. Let me give you 2 rouge marks as well so big sister won't lose too miserably. Qin Mu's cheeks turned beet red as his heart became restless as he walked out of the room in a stupor. The cat house hall master giggled. If I had known I could defeat you like this, I would have kissed you earlier. If you have any trouble in the future, just find a cat house and tell the girls there that you are looking for Fu Qingyun, and you will be able to find me. Qin Mu stood in front of the next room door to calm his mind back to normal first. The youth wiped off the lipstick prints on his face and walked into the next room while thinking to himself, no wonder Grandpa Blind said women are all transformed from demoness. With just a kiss, my heart was almost sucked away. In the next room, there was a female butcher with a face that was even fiercer than male butchers. She was grinding her pig slaughtering knife in her hands and had a bone pick in her mouth. Just as Qin Mu entered the room, The female butcher brandished her knife and slashed towards Qin Mu without a word, raising violent gusts of wind in the small room. Every slash was so ruthless that it could slice apart his belly without mercy. Qin Mu immediately pulled out his knife to block. Ding, 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 ding. Pattering sounds that were like beads dropping on a jade plate resonated out. The two then jumped across each other and turned back. The two knives in the female butcher's hands turned 180 degrees as she grabbed the knives in a reverse grip. Her eyes revealed an expression of excitement as she exclaimed in admiration, "Splendid knife skills." Qin Mu also held his pig-slaughtering knife in a reverse grip and said carefully, "Big sister, you and I are holding our knives in a reverse grip, which means the next move we make should be a sure kill ultimate move. Knives are heartless after all. How about this? Let's use our hands as knives and take care not to overdo it." The female butcher threw her pig-slaughtering knives away, which stabbed into the wall as she smiled. "You're right. Holding knives in reverse grip means we're going to kill. If I kill you, Cult Mistress will definitely be mad and kill me. Let's fight barehanded." Qin Mu's vital chi whirled and swept up his pig-slaughtering knife to sheath it back. With a jolt of his hands, flames ignited into two knives. The female butcher trembled her hands and the edges of blades appeared around her hands. It was the white tiger vital chi, which sharpness was unmatched. Swinging both her hands and slashing through the air, she pounced towards Qin Mu. "Young master, your fire knives will be at a disadvantage. They aren't as sharp as white tiger vital chi." Qin Mu's gaze flickered. The moving flames flew down and extended to his small arms as if he was reverse gripping. Pig-slaughtering knife skill third form, raising the knife from forbidden. The two of them almost had their bodies stick together as their footsteps moved continuously. With their knives so close to each other, they didn't even have to use their eyes to look. Just by feeling the strength coming out from one another's body, they could tell each other's movement and react accordingly, be it offense or defense. The main thing about reverse gripping was to be close, to minimize the degree of swings, to maximize the speed of the knife and tricky angles. This is the highest level of battle method among the battle techniques. No matter if it's the spell factions or the divine arts faction, if they were to let an expert on the battle technique school be so close to them, they'll surely die. All 640 muscles in Qin Mu's body continuously trembled under his skin to provide him the maximum burst of strength in the shortest distance. In just a short while, the female butcher and he were sweating profusely. To them, mobilizing so many muscles in such a short time while calculating the trajectory of the opponent's muscle in order to defend against the most vicious attack as well as cutting down the opponent, consumes a huge amount of energy for them. Suddenly, with his hands as knives, Qin Mu's hands entered a gap below the female butcher. Raising his hand upwards, he completely sliced apart the oily apron in front of her chest. The female butcher took a step back and dismissed the white tiger vital chi on her hands and took off the apron that had split into two halves, throwing them aside as she laughed cheerfully. "I've lost and you've won. Your knife skills ain't bad. If you can't walk through all 360 houses, you can always come with me and slaughter pigs for a living." Qin Mu had a favorable impression of this chubby big sister and smiled. "I can still refine medicine and not necessarily have to slaughter pigs. I can also be a doctor to help the people." The female butcher spat out the bone pick in her mouth and sneered. "A doctor? If your patient died during your treatment, the victim's family would make you compensate them until you were bankrupt. It's still better for you to slaughter pigs. It's a stable job. If you slaughter pigs with me, I'll make sure you eat well and live well." Qin Mu's head started to swell as he inched away and mumbled, We'll see. I'm still young now." "Young master." The female butcher raised her hands and pulled out the two pig-slaughtering knives from the wall and stopped him in his track as she said in a serious tone, "When you go back and meet Cult Mistress, do tell her that I, Bai Yao, miss her quite a lot and still remember her good." Qin Mu nodded. The female butcher, Bai Yao, walked downstairs and came out to the village only to hear a sudden crash. As she raised her head to look upwards, he saw the wall of the wooden building exploding outwards as the snake catcher hall master flew down, falling head first into the ground and shattering the stone pavement. Just as Bai Yao went forward and was about to pull the snake catcher hall master out from the ground, Another bang sounded out and another man flew out from the shattered wall while flailing his limbs and smack face first onto the opposite building. Bang! Another loud sound resonated out as the Divinity Hall Master flew out from the wall he shattered. Before he could even land, a devil voice sounded out from the building above. Bo is amo yi. A violent tremor traveled over as the traveling merchant Hall Master followed him and flew out, pulling snake catching Hall Master out from the ground. Bai Yao looked up and muttered to herself, "Young Master Mu's warm-up has just ended and he's starting to get serious." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 58. Young Cult Master. The people in the courtyard increased in number. They were of all shapes and sizes, and they all had different professions. The only similarity they shared now was that they were all looking up at the utterly dilapidated wooden building, which was now filled with thousands of holes. Finally, the Wood Hall Master was beaten down as the whole wooden building collapsed to the ground. Amidst the collapsed building, a green dragon coiled around his body, and he punched away the shattered woods that were flying towards him as he walked to the second building. Bang, bang, bang. The wooden building tremored continuously as if a huge beast was rampaging through the building. The second building wasn't any better than the first, as the walls were exploding with figures flying out one after another. Qin Mu was progressing faster and faster. It was obvious that he was absorbing battle experience, raising his battle awareness and his skills after defeating the Hall Masters one after another. Rumble. The second building collapsed and raised dust into the air. Qin Mu then proceeded to the third building. The night fell. In the village of the Heavenly Devil Cult, the stone basins on top of the stone pillars were filled with flammable oil and were ignited. Inside the village was bright like daylight, yet outside the village was pitch-black darkness. Once the light in the village comes into contact with the darkness, the lights in the village would be consumed by the darkness. It was two different worlds in and out of the village. Among the fiery glow, over 300 Hall Masters of Heavenly Devil Cult stood in the village as they raised their heads and looked at the last wooden building. There were a total of 9 wooden buildings. Every building had 40 Hall Masters that were guarding 40 rooms. By now, Qin Mu had fought his way to the 9th building and was about to reach the top. Young Master Mu hasn't taken a rest for an entire day and night. Am I right? Cathouse Hall Master replied softly. He started fighting since morning, and other than having lunch and dinner, it seems like he hasn't stopped fighting yet. Wind Riding Hall Master said, "It's almost morning and he is about to reach the top of the 9th building. Doesn't his energy and vital chi seem too plentiful? It doesn't appear that he had used up any at all. In addition, his stamina is so powerful that it's scary. However, the few fellows at the top floor of the 9th building aren't that easy to deal with either." On the top floor, the 4 people were the 4 great cornerstones of all 360 Hall Masters: Green Dragon, Vermilion Bird, White Tiger, and Black Tortoise. These 4 halls corresponded to the 4 great spirit bodies, and therefore, the chosen Hall Masters were outstanding talents who were carefully picked. These 4 halls had the strongest martial power among all 360 halls. The other Hall Masters all have their own talents and managed a single profession, whereas these 4 halls were only in charge of battle prowess. In the history of Heavenly Devil Cult, most of the cult protector elders come from these 4 halls. Even some cult masters had come from these 4 halls. The room in which Qin Mu had entered was the White Tiger Hall Master's room. White Tiger Vital Chi specializes in sharpness and is unbreakable. Back when the cult master, Li Tianxing, was killed wretchedly on his wedding night and the cult mistress having vanished with the cult's legacy Holy Bible, the 4 great Hall Masters were all trained by the Devil Cult Patriarch to take over as the next cult master. Though he didn't expect them to be able to expand Heavenly Devil Cult, he wanted them to not be swallowed up by Eternal Peace Empire. Even though the 4 great Hall Masters didn't reach the anticipation of Devil Cult Patriarch, they all had astonishing growth in strength. Despite White Tiger Hall Master having sealed his other divine treasures and leaving his spirit embryo divine treasure open, he was still a formidable enemy that Qin Mu had never met before. This woman had refined her vital chi into an extremely durable vital chi thread. However, she didn't cultivate any methods of using chi to manipulate sword. Her vital chi thread itself was her sword. It was almost impossible to see her vital chi thread clearly. When Qin Mu stepped into the room, the White Tiger Hall Master had her vital chi thread extending out from her 10 fingers and draped around all corners of the room, making it difficult for Qin Mu to walk. Her body was like an enchanting demoness in the great ruins. She was extremely flexible and moved freely in the room. Her fingertips had waves and waves of vital chi swords shooting out in all directions towards Qin Mu. They appeared to be her fingernails, yet they also seemed like flexible swords that could control their lengths freely. Moving like a feline, she was extremely nimble in the small room. Whether it was the walls or the ceilings, they were all like flat ground to her. This battle was very tiring. Qin Mu used his pig slaughtering knife to cut down the fine vital chi thread in the room, but every strand was extremely durable and hard to cut apart. Furthermore, the White Tiger Hall Master kept putting up more threads with her trusty hands, disabling Qin Mu from defending against it. On the other hand, the White Tiger Hall Master could move freely in her room and even use her limbs to stand on her vital chi thread, traveling to and fro as if she was flying. Using her vital chi as a thread, her flexible sword was very peculiar. It could curve in all ways and even bend 18 times, showing that her sword skills were not weak as well. Qin Mu was repeatedly wounded, as he was required to be careful of both her vital chi thread as well as her vital chi sword, making it very tiring for him. Whether it was the old Ma's fist skills or the cripple's leg skills, he was unable to execute it. In addition, Butcher's knife skills couldn't be unleashed properly due to all the obstruction. Thus he was at a disadvantage. Finally, with a stab of his sword, the wooden sword managed to hit the White Tiger Hall Master in the chest even after it was split into two by her vital chi thread. It pinned her to the wall and sent her out of the wooden building when the wall shattered. Qin Mu raised his knife to cut away all the vital chi thread in the room and then took out medicine to apply on himself before bandaging up his wounds. Sitting down, he took the time to recuperate and ate the food provided in the room. When the pain from his body has subsided, his stamina also recovered quite a bit. Breaking a few planks, he used pig slaughtering knife to shave them into wooden swords and place them on his back before entering the next room. He had defeated 357 rooms out of 360 rooms. Now he was left with the last 3 rooms. His stamina and will had reached their maximum limits. The humming sound in his head was like the commotion of 1,000 men. He had never been so exhausted before, and he wanted to lie on the floor to sleep more than anything else. Even his spirit embryo wasn't as active as it was before and was lacking in vitality. He was no longer holding on to his will but from his mechanical way of battling to fight on relying on his instinct. There was only one thought in his mind. These people can't take away Granny C who had raised him up. His parents may have given him life, but it was Granny C who had saved his life and raised him up painstakingly. Granny C was his mother and his closest kin. In the next room, the Green Dragon Hall Master came. When he saw Qin Mu walking over, he frowned. "Young Master Mu, you don't look okay. There's no need to rush. You can always take a break first." Before he could even finish speaking, Qin Mu raised his hand and stabbed forward. In a flash, the wooden sword flew straight towards Green Dragon Hall Master's body and blew him away. In a daze, Qin Mu turned around and lifted his legs mechanically, slowly walking to the next room. Bang! The wooden wall of the next room exploded open as Black Tortoise Hall Master used his Black Tortoise shield to block Qin Mu's sword. However, he didn't expect the terrifying strength that was hidden in the sword to blow him away as well. Qin Mu slowly walked out of this room and moved to the next room with heavy footsteps. "Young Master Mu, I can wait for you to rest first." Bang! Qin Mu stabbed forward and sent the Vermilion Bird Hall Master flying. "It's done." Qin Mu was stumped. Suddenly, all his remaining strength seeped out of his body and his legs turned limp, causing him to fall to the ground. In the distance, he could hear the clucking of the hen dragon from disabled elderly village. That was the sound the hen dragon makes after laying its egg. However, the youth was simply too exhausted and fell into a deep slumber soon after. At this moment, his spirit embryo frantically absorbed the golden light in his spirit embryo divine treasure and fell into a slumber as well. Qin Mu had no idea how long he slept. When he woke up in a daze, he seemingly saw a village chief and apothecary and heard their voices from high up as if they were very far away. There isn't too much of a problem. It's just that he's too exhausted. Qin Mu then fell back asleep. He woke up several times and saw many faces beside him. Sometimes it was Granny C, other times it was the young patriarch of Heavenly Devil Cult. He wanted to say something, but he had no energy and once again fell back asleep. When Qin Mu woke up again, he felt soreness all over his body, but he was energized. The wounds on his body had also scabbed and had started to peel off. It must have been apothecary reapplying ointments on him. He sat up again and glanced around. He noticed that he was still in the room of the Vermilion Bird Hall Master, and the surroundings were quiet without any sound. My spirit embryo is asleep again. Qin Mu checked his body and discovered that other than his spirit embryo being silent, there were no major problems. Therefore he endured the soreness in his body and tried to stand up. Supporting himself on the stairs, he slowly walked downstairs. Every movement and every step caused excruciating pain in his muscle. When he finally reached the first floor with difficulty, he walked out of the wooden building and raised his head to have a look and was stunned by the sight. The village of Heavenly Devil Cult was filled with people, and most of them were familiar faces. He had seen all 360 hall masters, and they were all in the crowd. Other than the hall masters, there were also unfamiliar faces. There were strong workers that were 30 yards tall, white-haired elders, solemn left and right guardians, for great cult heavenly kings, and 8 great supervisors. They were either standing or sitting, and all of them were waiting silently without making a sound. Seeing Qin Mu walking out from the wooden building, they all rose one after another and had their gaze on Qin Mu with a solemn expression. The young patriarch of the devil cult was standing at the village entrance alongside the village chief, apothecary, old Ma, and the rest. Granny C was also standing there with a complicated expression as she looked at Qin Mu. Suddenly, for elders bowed and their resonating voice pierced the clouds. The 4 great cult heavenly kings of the sacred cult pay our respects to young cult master. Qin Mu stared blankly and didn't know what to do. However, more voices rang out in unison. The left and right guardians of the sacred cult pay our respects to young cult master. The 8 great supervisors of the sacred cult pay our respects to young cult master. The 12 cult protector elders of the sacred cult pay our respects to young cult master. An even more resonating voice rang out. It was the deafening voice of all 360 hall master shouting in unison. The 360 hall masters of the sacred cult pay our respects to young cult master. When had Qin Mu ever seen this kind of spectacle before? He couldn't help but feeling flustered and looked pleadingly at village chief, Granny C, and the rest. However, they remained where they were and looked from afar. The cowherd boy of disabled elderly village composed himself and suddenly had a calm bearing as he slowly raised both of his hands and spoke in a steady pace. You may all rise. Thank you, young cult master. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 59, The Third Awakening. At the entrance of the village chief, Old Ma, deaf, blind, and the rest looked at the ceremony next door in a daze with emotions surging forth in their hearts. Who would have thought the biggest cult of the devil path, the heavenly devil cult with an impressive reputation, would welcome their future cult master in such a desolated place? A young cult master who was not even 12 years old? Witnessing this kept making them felt like they were watching the story of a legend. Even the beautiful sunshine was shining in many colors. Granny C suddenly teared up and choked. He is going to leave us. This is a good thing, Granny. Apothecary smiled warmly. The fletching will always grow up one day. They will have to fly outside to the vast world, and go against the wind and waves, to leave their homes to see the dangers of the outside world. We can never make him remain by the side of us disabled elderly for the rest of our lives. Blind had a serene expression as he said calmly. Legend begins from the first step he takes out from the village. With a smile on his face, Mute made a few hand signs and Deaf laughed. You're right. Moore's future will definitely be more interesting than ours. The riverbank of surging river. Several magnificent and luxurious ships sailed in and stopped at the riverbank. The villagers of the heavenly devil village started to leave one after another. Some traveled away through the sky while others took the ship and left. Some even transformed into strange beasts and entered the forest, while some transformed into flames and water to leave. They all had their own unique abilities, and Qin Mu was dazzled. He may have defeated them in spirit embryo realm, but he himself did not have all these weird and rare abilities. "Goodbye, young cult master." A woman waved to him before falling backward into the river and turned into a puddle. Qin Mu waved back. He didn't know whether they were good guys or bad guys. He only knew he had become their young cult master just like that. Will he still meet them when he leaves the Great Ruins? Our sacred cult had entered the Great Ruins 40 years ago to search for cult mistress, and now our virtuous achievements have come to their successful conclusion. Brother, cult mistress, you should know our sacred cult had not made a move for the past 40 years and had no cult master to control the situation. Without our backbone, our sacred cult today is already in imminent danger. The young patriarch also stood up to leave and say his goodbyes to the village chief and Granny C. Now that the young cult master is chosen, it can only pacify the will of people temporarily, but not for long. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had his eyes on our sacred cult and wanted to subdue us to work for him. With me still being alive, I can delay this from happening for a few years. Therefore, when young cult master grows up, he must leave Great Ruins and become the cult master of our sacred cult officially. Village chief looked at Granny C. She nodded her head and replied, "Don't worry, patriarch. Since I've killed a cult master, I'll return one to you. He will go to the sacred cult when he grows up and takes over the reins as you wish." Young patriarch called the elder of discipline over and gave everyone a bow before turning around. Walking towards the surging river, the young and old man wearing cloth tunics and straw shoes stepped onto the river, traveling away. Blind held onto his bamboo cane with both of his hands as he sang loudly, reverberating between the two banks of the surging river. One coat, one hat, one small boat, one long thread and 1-inch hook. One happy song with one wine jar, one man fishes on one spring stream. Devil cult patriarch. You and I are already old, and I don't know if we'll have the chance to meet again. Farewell. In the river, the young patriarch stopped in his footsteps and turned around to wave. Goodbye, everyone. Ha ha. He also started to sing loudly. 800 old men idle at home, filled with ambitions that never cease. Rising to the heaven after death, clouds still float and water still flows. Blind praised. As expected of the devil cult patriarch, to be indifferent to life and death, thinking that his life has been completed, and smilingly look down on the changes in the human world from the heaven after his death. Village leisurely said, "This is a grandmaster. You aren't far from attaining this frame of mind, blind." He's still frivolous. Deaf laughed. Blind only knows how to blindly read out verses, but actually knows nothing of them. The verses don't match the situation or scenery at all. On the other hand, Devil Cult Patriarch's poem matches both the situation and the scenery without losing any heroism. Blind stuttered, "Why, you don't know poems and you only criticize?" Everyone laughed loudly. Qin Mu also had a smile on his face as he looked at all these optimistic people. They may all be disabled in some ways, but their spirits were extremely strong and sound. "My kins!" Suddenly, he felt a surging force flowing out from the heart of his brows. Qin Mu's heart jolted, and he immediately looked into his spirit embryo divine treasure, and was stunned for a slight second. My spirit embryo has awakened again. This was the third time his spirit embryo had awakened. The first was when his consciousness had fused with it. The second time was when he was observing fire and water in the smithy, where the spirit embryo had a second awakening after falling silent. This time, it was after his experience with all 360 rooms, where the spirit embryo had absorbed all the golden light in the divine treasure and fell into slumber again. However, its slumber was slightly longer this time and had only awakened now. What change would this awakening bring him? Awakened again? Everyone had a weird expression when Qin Mu told them about the third awakening of his spirit embryo. Village chief, apothecary, Old Ma's expression turned even stranger. The spirit embryo of other people only needs to awaken once, so why did Qin Mu's spirit embryo keep awakening on and off? Does the 4 great spirit bodies also awaken thrice? Qin Mu asked. Everyone looked at each other in the eyes and shook their head before looking at Village Chief in unison. Village Chief couldn't help feeling a headache as he grumbled to himself. It was fine if Qin Mu had awakened once, but to awaken time after time again was also an unfathomable mystery to him. It's the Overlord body. Village Chief coughed and blamed it on the Overlord body for his lack of knowledge. Aren't all of you lacking too much knowledge? What the technique for Overlord body called? Overlord body 3 elixir technique. What are the 3 elixirs? The first awakening means the first elixir, the second awakening means the second elixir, and third awakening means the third elixir. Now that Mu had awakened the 3rd time, it means that his Overlord body 3 elixir technique had small attainment. You can't be arrogant, Mu. Qin Mu immediately nodded his head. I will definitely not be arrogant. Apothecary seemingly smiled. What if Mu awakened the 4th time? Will it be 4 elixir? Village Chief flew into a rage from humiliation. He wanted to just pounce on him and stab him in his 2 ribs. However, Apothecary wasn't wrong. What if this brat's spirit embryo really awakens a 4th time? How would he lie his way out then? Cough, cough. Mu, what difference do you feel about your 3rd awakening? Village Chief changed the topic and asked. Qin Mu experienced his spirit embryo thoroughly and didn't feel anything different from before. The only difference was the sea of golden light was much thinner than before. The golden sea was very thin now, and the golden light in the golden sea doesn't seem to be able to produce themselves automatically. Every bit that was absorbed by the spirit embryo meant that it was becoming lesser. Qin Mu executed his vital qi, and his spirit embryo mobilized his vital qi as well. Sometimes it was green dragon coiling around his body, while other times he was covered by the black tortoise or would grow wings on his back. His vital qi would transform according to his will and no longer had to observe fire and water. Qin Mu told everyone, and they all looked at each other in dismay, unable to understand the change. This is a good thing. Village Chief let out a murky breath and said, the 3rd awakening of the Overlord body's spirit embryo allows him to change his attributes as will. In battles, this would allow him to easily unleash the power of various moves, and that's the marvel of the Overlord body 3 elixir technique. Everyone nodded their heads. Apothecary was about to say something but was stared at by Village Chief. He could only keep it to himself as he cursed the Village Chief silently. I'll see how you lie when Qin Mu awakens for the 4th time. The gas leaves your nose like smoke, clears the insides your body and mind, makes a spherical world, which is completely empty, just like glass. Under the waterfall of Jade Cloud Valley, the sound of a young voice reciting could be heard coming from the straw hut. Looking into the windows, one could see a 14 to 15-year-old youth holding onto a book as he walked around in the hut while reciting it. A fox with snow-white fur had her gaze fixed on him. The youth was Qin Mu, and the white fox was Hu Linger, the great demon of Jade Cloud Valley. Not long after, Hu Linger's breathing became longer, and 2 white gas, which was like smoke, moved in and out as she inhaled and exhaled. Hu Linger's vital qi had become rich and mellow. The quality of her vital qi had reached an extremely high realm, with her breath being like smoke. It had been 2 years and 8 months since the time Heavenly Devil Cult had visited. Winter had just passed and all lives were returning. It was still a season with spring chill in the air. The surface of Surging River had yet to melt completely as the broken ice flowed down the river. The twists and turns of the river would frequently be obstructed by ice. The more ice that was piled, the higher it became, and eventually, it would form a dammed lake. This would cause the water to accumulate over time, and when the ice wall could no longer withstand the wall, a huge flood would occur and drown countless of people and strange beasts as it flows downstream. These few days, Blind, Granny C, Cripple and the rest went downstream to look for the dam so they weren't in the village. Therefore, Qin Mu came out to look for Hu Linger and explained the scriptures to her. In 2 years, his physique had almost caught up to Blind, though he was still shorter than Apothecary, who had a towering physique. Suddenly, a forest-shaking bellow came from outside the window. Qin Mu closed the book and placed it back on the bookshelf. The white fox was also startled awake by the bellow. As they looked out, they saw a huge beast that was over 30 yards in height sprinting toward their straw hut. The huge beast had bone plates all over its body and was sprinting like thunder. It had a head of a dragon and feet of an elephant. It was a dragon elephant, a mutant born from a dragon and an elephant. However, on the back of the dragon elephant, there was a pitch-black devil ape sitting on it. It was tall and sturdy and had a monk staff with 12 golden loops as it rode the dragon elephant towards the straw hut aggressively. Linger immediately jumped in front of Qin Mu. She opened her mouth and inhaled deeply before blowing forward. Whoosh! The violent gust blew straight towards the dragon elephant and the devil ape. Linger's tail swayed and the violent gust became even more frantic as it began to swirl and turn into a tornado that swept the dragon elephant and devil ape into the sky. The devil ape leaped from the back of the dragon elephant while both of its hands held onto the monk staff, which was becoming bigger and bigger. Kakara! Devil ape gave a loud roar and came smashing down like a small mountain. Both of its hands gripped tightly onto the monk staff and pierced it into the ground. The violent wind currents instantly surged forth in all directions, breaking apart the little fox's tornado spell. The devil ape pulled out his monk staff and leaped up as if it was flying and raised its monk staff to smash towards Linger. However, it only heard a loud sound as Qin Mu raised his hand and blocked the move for Linger. At this moment, Linger leaped up and spat out wind that was like 3 yards long curved blades. As the 6 to 7 curved blades flew through the air, they didn't attack Devil Ape but instead flew towards Qin Mu. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 60. General Qin and 7th Young Master. It seemed like Qin Mu had expected it all along as he grabbed the Kakara monk staff single-handedly and forcefully raised the devil ape along with its monk staff up before ruthlessly smashing it on the ground. With his other hand, his 5 fingers flicked out and a series of 6 explosion sounds could be heard as he shattered the curved blades made from Linger's vital chi. Ong! The dragon elephant suddenly exerted force in its legs. Taking advantage of the space created by the devil ape, Linger rushed towards Qin Mu with its head lowered and made Qin Mu flew off from the collision. The instant the dragon elephant collided into Qin Mu, its trunk suddenly grew longer and wrapped around Qin Mu, who was in midair, and pulled him back before raising his trunk up and smashing him into the ground. The dragon elephant pulled him out from the ground and was ready to smash him once more. However, Qin Mu suddenly changed his leg skill and kicked the elephant trunk away before kicking the dragon elephant's face another 100 times, sending it flying. Young down. A green dragon coiled around the devil ape's majestic body, smacking Qin Mu, who had just sent the dragon elephant flying onto the ground. With a roar, its thick and sturdy short leg lifted up and stepped mercilessly onto Qin Mu. Cripple's heaven-pilfering leg skill. Trample on Mount Meru. Qin Mu, who was sprawled onto the floor from the impact, immediately flipped over and raised a single leg up while his body laid parallel to the ground. His other leg then came face to face with Devil Ape's huge feet. He had always executed the move Trample on Mount Meru. However, he had to change to this move in a rush, so it did not have the usual standard, but the power of it was astonishing nonetheless. Devil Ape grunted as it stumbled a few steps back. It then followed up by grabbing the dragon elephant's tail and smashing it towards Qin Mu. At the same time, Linger's tail swayed and the whistling of wind sounded out as curved blades came spinning like tires towards Qin Mu. Suddenly, sounds of breaking through the air came from the sky. Qin Mu's heart slightly jolted and immediately dodged Linger and Devil Ape's attacks. Looking at the source of the sounds, he could see 100 males and females wearing armor as they leaped through the forest and towards the upstream of the surging river. A few of them also noticed them and immediately stopped to take a look. One of the men saw Qin Mu, Devil Ape, and a white fox, and commented in astonishment, "Hunter, don't be a busybody, we need to move." Another person shouted softly, "The ship is almost here. We have to set up the formation on the river before the ship arrives. Isn't this inappropriate? It wouldn't be good for us if words of us being spotted were to travel out. There are many experts hiding in seclusion in the great ruins. Don't cause any more trouble than necessary. Let us move. Their ship is very fast, and if we miss it, it would be too late for regrets. Wind picked up under those people's feet, and they quickly vanished into the forest. Qin Mu was bewildered, and he spoke softly. These people don't look like people from the great ruins. They seem to be rushing upstream and are planning to ambush somebody. The person even wanted to silence us, so they don't seem like good guys. Linger, big fella, you see, honest people like us are always at a disadvantage, always getting silenced by people. The little white fox immediately nodded her head in deep approval while Devil Ape twitched its mouth. Believe? Ghost. Qin Mu was about to say something when Dragon Elephant suddenly sprinted back and blew him away. Devil Ape flew into a rage and violently pummeled the Dragon Elephant. Rest? Understand? Dragon Elephant whimpered from the beatings. Qin Mu had also wanted to give it a beating, but seeing how badly Devil Ape had pummeled it, he let it go. This Dragon Elephant was the strange beast that lived next door to the Valley of Doom Suppression Palace. It also had its own territory and was extraordinary with its body full of strength. Dragon Elephant and Devil Ape were always unable to get along and would fight frequently. Dragon Elephant would always run into Devil Ape's territory to steal wild beasts, but ever since Qin Mu became the territorial master of the Valley of Doom Suppression Palace and taught Devil Ape how to cultivate, the Dragon Elephant was no longer a match for Devil Ape. Devil Ape would frequently seek revenge and beat it up several times. When the Dragon Elephant could no longer take it, it decided to surrender and become Devil Ape's mount, looking rather impressive. However, Dragon Elephant was slightly dumber and not as intelligent as Devil Ape and Little Fox. Qin Mu's gaze flickered as he suddenly leaped up onto the waterfall and the mountain ridge. Over the mountain ridge was surging river that was flowing by the walls of the cliff. The river water brought the ice blocks downstream, and there was still many floating ice on the surface. At this time, there was normally no ship that would sail on the river. And at this moment, Qin Mu saw a ship sailing from the bottom of the river. It had a very fast speed as it broke through the ice. It was very outrageous seeing how fast it was going while going upstream and against the floating ice. Devil Ape, Linger, and Dragon Elephant had also climbed up and sat beside him. Devil Ape plucked up a pine tree and gave some pine leaves to the little fox. Linger immediately shook her head, but Devil Ape said, "Eat, strong." Linger smiled and replied, "I don't eat this." Devil Ape then brought the pine leaves to the face of Dragon Elephant and said, "Eat, strong." Dragon Elephant shook its head, but Devil Ape pressed down his head and pummeled it again in anger. "Eat." Dragon Elephant's eyes welled up with tears and ate the pine leaves silently, appeasing Devil Ape, who then sat down to eat its share slowly. Linger couldn't resist speaking out, "Big fella, did you know? Dragon Elephant is not a vegetarian. It eats meat as it had the nature of a dragon and not an elephant." Dragon Elephant felt moved and immediately nodded its head. Devil Ape sneered, "Vegetarian, strong. I vegetarian, strong." Dragon Elephant's tears flowed profusely as it continued to eat the pine leaves. The ship sailed closer, and Qin Mu immediately saw the officers and soldiers wearing armor on the ship. There was an imperial canopy, and under it was a young general sitting there in an imposing manner. On the wide deck there was also a few paintings. In front of every painter was a bronze mirror that was 3 yards in height. At the side of the ship, there were also soldiers dressed like herders as they opened iron cages and released the golden eagles from the ship. Awakening his heaven's eyes secretly, he could see pictures of green hills and clear waters that kept on changing appearances as reflected on the bronze mirrors. Suddenly, the cries of eagles sounded out, and Qin Mu raised his head to see a golden eagle flying above them. He instantly realized what was happening. The pictures in the bronze mirror is showing them what the golden eagle is seeing. What sorcery is this? To project what the golden eagle see into a picture on the mirror. That's it. The painters are painting a topographic map of great ruins, releasing the golden eagles high up into the sky to look at the topography of the areas around Surging River. Then projecting it onto the bronze mirror allows the painters to paint the landscape. In this way, as they sail from downstream to upstream, they could paint out the topography of Surging River. Who are these people? Why are they painting the topographic map of Surging River? What are they using the map for? Qin Mu blinked his eyes in puzzlement. At this moment, a soldier quickly went under the canopy and knelt down on one leg as he gave a fist and palm salute. General Qin, there's someone spying on us on the riverbank. The young general under the canopy raised his eyebrows and turned his head to look at Qin Mu. Qin Mu's heart leaped as the gaze of the general turned over. It was as if there were two extremely bright lights shining over, dazzling his eyes and disabling him from seeing anything. Linger and Devil Ape also exclaimed in astonishment and covered their eyes with their hands. Only Dragon Elephant was concentrated on eating the pine leaves and didn't notice anything wrong. They're just normal villagers on the riverbank. The General Qin closed his eyes to take a nap as he said, "They aren't any threat if they can't even handle my gaze. There's no need to worry about them." "Yes, General." The soldier hesitated for a moment and continued, "General, 7 months ago under the Emperor's orders, we had searched and seized the house of Yanzheng, the director of Board of Rights. Yanzheng always had an honest reputation among all levels of society and frequently spoke up for the small sections. He was also from the Huaqing sword sect and had a high position in all levels of society. Seeing how General had seized his house and threw him into prison with the Emperor ordering his execution under General's hand, our journey won't be too smooth. The remaining of Yanzheng's lackeys would lay their hands on us." General Qin smiled coldly. It was the Emperor's order to search and seize his house. It was also the Emperor's order to execute him, so what does it have to do with me? Yanzheng angled for fame and actually accused that Imperial Preceptor had intentions of mutiny, wanting the Emperor to immediately execute the Imperial Preceptor. How preposterous! For just a slight moment of fame, he would dare to drive a wedge between the Emperor and Imperial Preceptor's friendship. He deserves death due to his impure intentions, so who else should be killed if not him? He rubbed his temple and sighed. The Emperor wanted me to seize his house and execute him because I'm Imperial Preceptor's disciple and was promoted by him. It's also to tell all levels of society that the Emperor has had the utmost trust in Imperial Preceptor and for the rest of the treacherous court officials to give up these thoughts. What a pity that some people couldn't see the current politics clearly and could not understand the meaning behind them, sending themselves to death. The soldier continued, "However, there might be people angling for fame waiting to ambush us." General Qin waved his hand and said indifferently, "I'm exactly trying to bait the remaining lackeys of Yanzheng out and capture all the rebels in one swoop." Standing up, he walked to the head of the ship and looked at the churning river bringing the floating ice downstream. Looking at the mountain range and cliff, he said indifferently, "Imperial Preceptor had ordered me to enter Great Ruins to draft out the topographic map of Surging River for the Empire so to incorporate Great Ruins into our Empire's territory. These rebels not only have a lack of understanding towards the hard work of Imperial Preceptor, they even want to kill me? Aren't they worthy of death for trying to create chaos in the lands of Eternal Peace Empire?" At this moment, a young master walked out from the ship's cabin. He wasn't fat, but he had a little baby fat on his face. With a dot of red on the heart of his brow and a folding fan, he laughed. I don't know whether to laugh or cry at the fact that this kind of person carries the title of an honest and faithful official. This kind of faithful official and honesty should just be exterminated. General Qin immediately turned around and greeted, "Seventh young master." The seventh young master raised his head and looked up the mountain. From the mountain, the shadow of Qin Mu and Devil Ape projected down and shrouded the sailing ship. "General Qin, I've heard that the aboriginals in Great Ruins are all people abandoned by gods. Am I right?" Seventh young master asked.